Alright, the next one is gonna be probably a surprise to some of you, because you might not have. Why is everyone deciding to go buy at this moment? Stop doing crime, y'all. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very nerdy with some surprises of the year. So as you would have seen, my last video was of some disappointing reads that I had this year in 2021, and today we're going to get an uplifting note on those and talk about some books that I just loved, were such surprises for me. So I've got another 7 to talk about, so let's dive right on in. The first one I'm going to do is the only one that I don't have a physical copy for, so I don't forget about it, and that is Educated. Now, this one I read, I want to say in January, like it was one of my first reads of the year. It was way back when my parents made their debut and my TBR game. My dad picked this one for me, and I absolutely adored this book. Now, it is a tough book to get through because it follows this woman as she's growing up in a very sheltered home, to like the point of like she didn't even have a birth certificate for most of her life. So it's her kind of being like educating herself and learning how to go to school and going to school and that kind of thing, and getting in college and things like that, and just kind of like learning and getting into schools and stuff. So it's really tough story because like her home life was not great, so trigger warnings for like all of the things. I would suggest checking out some trigger warnings online because it's been a while, obviously, since I've read this one, so I don't remember them all, but I do remember that there were quite a few. So definitely go check those out. But this one was just like one of those stories that you couldn't look away from. Like you couldn't stop reading. All I wanted to do was pick up this book and continue. It was just fascinating. And the fact that her writing is so good. Like she has a very amazing lyrical way of writing things, and you're so hooked by it. And also like this horrid like experience that she's had to go through, and just to see where she came from and where she is now is really fascinating. So I was completely surprised by this. I knew I had a feeling I was going to like this book, but I didn't realize I was going to like it as much as I did. So it was amazing. So the next one that was a huge surprise to me was actually the first in the Crescent City series by Sarah J Maas, which is House of Earth and Blood. Now, if you're relatively new to this channel, you were probably like, what the heck? This was a surprise? It was. I didn't read Sarah J Maas until near the beginning, maybe like March. I want to say this was like a March read of this year. And then I fell in love with this and read all the ACOTAR books, or most of them, and I just devoured them. So I had never read Sarah J Maas, so I was not sure what I was getting into. I thought I was gonna like it, but I was super nervous. This was a big chunky fantasy, and I do not do big chunky fantasies. Also, this was an adult fantasy, and I am not the biggest fan of adult fantasies. I have a hard time grasping the worlds at times, so I was very nervous going into this one. But I devoured this in like 2 days, I want to say. Like, I did nothing but read this book. I tabbed the crap out of this book. I raved for months about this book. I just wanted everyone to read this. I thought it was amazing. So, yeah, now I'm a Sarah J Maas fan, which is a new development as of this year. So this was a huge surprise for me because I was so nervous going into this book because I didn't know what to expect. And I loved her world. I loved her romance. I loved all of it. So I'm very excited for her new book that's in the series coming out next year, but I'm very scared for the romance in this book because she likes to switch things up in the second book when it comes to romances, and I really don't want her to do that because I like this guy. So yes, this was a huge surprise for me, and I devoured it, and oh my goodness, I will never stop raving about it. It was amazing. The next one might be a surprise for y'all as to why it was a surprise, but let me talk about it. And that is I Speak Boy by Jessica Brody. So this is a middle grade modern adaptation, or not adaptation, but like retelling of the story Emma by Jane Austen. So Emma's not my favorite book by Jane Austen, but I do like the plot line of it. I think it's really interesting, and I've never seen it being retold in a modern setting, or like in a younger setting like this. So I thought I was gonna like it, but I absolutely knew almost nothing about this book going in. I got an ARC from it on NetGalley, so I was really excited about it, but I was also like very hesitant because some adaptions, I keep saying adaptions, some retellings and reimaginings that I've read in the past from authors that do things based on a Jane Austen have been a little iffy. There's always some good ones, but there's some that are a little iffy. So I wasn't sure what to expect in this one, and it just was so much fun. I also read this one in like 2 days. So I thought this was very clever and very well done because you do have some of the characters from the story of Emma in here. You've got some places in here, and you've got like the general plot structure is the same as Emma, but you don't need to know Emma to go into this and love it. That's what I loved about this, is that it completely stands on its own, and the aspect of the app was fascinating. Maybe I should tell you what this is about. This is an Emma, like I said, an Emma retelling, but it follows our main character, Em, who is obsessed with boys and getting people in relationships and like matchmaking, basically. And she thinks she's really good at it, and she doesn't do so hot. So one day she wakes up, and on her phone, instead of having the like iTranslate app, it's called I Speak Boy or something like that, and it basically translates boys conversations. So she'll walk down the hall and she'll have this app open, and it'll like record the boy saying something, and on the app it'll tell you what the boy is actually thinking and what he's actually means by this statement. And it works on the entire male species. Like even some of the characters, like the teachers, will translate them as well. So it's really interesting, and she uses this to kind of like help matchmake people and get people together. So it's very fun, but the idea of this app is just fascinating to me. But I also loved it because like I saw myself in Em so much. Like I was boy crazed. I'm not gonna lie. I was obsessed with getting a boyfriend in like middle and high school. It was a thing. And so like just some of the situations she gets in and some of the things that she says and thinks, I relate so hard to, and I'm very upset that I related so hard to some, but I really thought it was very well done, and I think kids are gonna love this story, especially girls, because like boys are stupid, okay? Just gonna be honest, especially middle school boys. They don't know what they mean half the time, and I just think it's really interesting to see like how realistic this actually was, you know? So it was fun. I really liked it. It was so cute. Oh my goodness. The next one is actually probably also going to be a surprise to y'all because I didn't think I wasn't going to like this book. I just didn't realize how much I was going to like this book. And that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. So this was talked about for like about a year before I actually read it. Like I read the entire Brown Sisters series this year, and I want to say I only read this one before the third one came out. So like I was behind the trend, behind the times, and I thought it was going to be really good. I love a good romance. If it's any sort of adult romance, like I am there for it. I was afraid to go into this with like super high expectations because I didn't want those to like get in the way of my enjoyment, but I definitely had high expectations. And then they like were blown out of the water because this was so much better than I could have imagined. I loved the writing. That was my biggest surprise, was how much I loved this author's writing. She is a very similar writing style, in my opinion, to like Tessa Dare when it comes to like quips and funny moments and just like saying things in a way that is so realistic and so relatable, but it's not something that you would have thought to like phrase something, you know? And so I just really, really enjoyed this, and I devoured this as well in like 2 days. Oh my goodness, I loved this so much. So yeah, this was a huge surprise for me because I thought I'd hyped it up too much, and then it just blew that hypedness out of the water, and it was amazing. One of my favorite romances to date, for sure. The next one is one that I was super nervous about, so I will definitely leave a link above because I read this in a vlog, so check that out if you want to. But that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. So this one I'd put on like about 10,000 different TBRs, and I finally got around to reading it because I was reading it for a readathon that was all about finally getting around to the books that you've been putting off. So I thought this was a good one, but I was nervous because of the World War I and II aspect of it. I'm not a huge fan of books set during that time, only because they're usually so sad and depressing, which makes sense for the time period. I totally get why books are like that. But if it's a lot of war and a lot of like trenches and being in actual war, is not my favorite thing to read about, so I was very nervous going into this one, but it also had this Greek god aspect to it, so I was very interested, you know? And it was amazing. I loved everything about this book. It wasn't too focused on the war. I mean, it's all about the war. These characters took place, and these events that we're reading about took place during the war, but it's not like we're following all the soldiers in the trenches and we're following them actually fighting. We do that a little bit, but not a whole lot, which I did appreciate. But my favorite thing about this is the amount of layers there are to it, and I always talk about that. But, like, seriously, this book is basically Aphrodite telling the story of these two couples, and she gets the help of other people like Apollo, and I think she gets Ares' help and Hades' help, and so like everyone else kind of like is giving their input on the story, and they're all telling Hephaestus about this. And so you've got the plot line of the Greek gods, because that's a plot line in itself. Aphrodite is telling the story for a reason, and she's telling Hephaestus for a reason. And so you've got their plot line, but then within this, you've also got the plot line of one couple, and then the plot line of another couple, and it's just layers upon layers upon layers, and everything is written so well, and everything is structured so well, and the format of this was amazing, and I loved every second of this. It was so good. So I highly recommend the audiobook if you haven't picked this one up, because it is a full cast recording, which y'all know that I love. But yeah, I devoured this, and I also think it's really important to note that even though this is about the Greek gods, you don't really need to know anything about them. Like, they do kind of explain their powers a little bit, and it would help if you knew that about them already, but they're going to explain it to you anyway, so it really doesn't matter if you know it or not. If you're fascinated by any aspect of the story, do not let that deter you, because it's not something that you need to know already. They'll explain everything you need to know, which I appreciated. So I loved this. This was so well done. I will never stop hyping it up. I need to give this as a gift for people for Christmas. Like, people need to read this. This book is so good. The next book is one that I also was like startled. I could not believe I loved it so much. And that is The Invisible Life of Addie, LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Now, I've read one Schwab book before this one, which was the first in the Darker Shades of Magic series. Didn't particularly love it. Kind of have given up a little bit on that series. And everything about this plot sounded interesting, and I'd heard that this was nothing like anything she'd ever written before, so people who were like in love with her writing and in love with her stories previously didn't particularly love this one, and vice versa. So that gave me a little bit of hope. So I ended up reading this one for a vlog as well, and I devoured this book. I fell in love with Addie, I fell in love with Lucy, I fell in love with Henry. They were all so sweet. I just wanted to love them forever, and just like I sobbed at the end of this book. So it was so well done. It was so well crafted. It was so well formatted, because it kind of switches back timelines, because we follow Addie at the beginning of her journey when she gets, maybe I should tell you what this book is about. I'm really good at this, you guys. So for those of you who don't know, this book follows Addie LaRue, and she basically makes a deal with this devil character that she thinks is going to go one way and then ends up going another way, and so she is cursed to live forever but always be forgotten. And so if she leaves a room, the person she was just talking to will immediately forget her. And then in like the present day, she runs into this bookseller who remembers her, and so it's their story. So it's this dual timeline of it starting when she kind of makes this deal and watching her go through all of these centuries trying to figure out how to live, basically. And then also this modern timeline where you've got these two characters, like this guy that remembers her, and the two of them kind of creating a little friendship relationship there. So I loved it. I thought it was so well done. I thought it was so well crafted. I loved all of these characters. I am a huge fan. I think it's worth the hype, in my opinion, but I understand why some people wouldn't like this book. But I was so surprised, because I wasn't expecting really anything from this when I went into it, because I've had such bad experiences in the past, and it was amazing. I devoured it. Like, I didn't want to do anything but read this book, which was bad when I had to work. And the very last book that I'm going to talk about is one that I read just a couple of months ago, and that is The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page. This is the first in a duology. The second one is not out yet, but it's coming out next year. But I feel like this could be a good standalone, so like, the story kind of wraps up and you're kind of happy, you know, with the way this ends. But basically this takes place on a college campus and it follows this sorority that is called the Ravens. They're very selective as to who they take into their sorority, and everyone else just kind of looks at them like they're a little selective over there. Whereas if you're in the sorority, you know that you're in the sorority because you are a witch, and the sorority is actually a coven. So it's set on in a modern day setting because it's set on a college campus, but it has these fantastical elements to it, and I just really loved the weaving of like these magical elements and these witchy elements in a modern day setting. I loved the plot. It just kind of like comes out of nowhere because you're following two perspectives. You're following a girl who's been part of this sorority for a couple of years and wants to be the president next year, and then you follow this girl who's just going to college for the first time and doesn't realize that she's a witch and starts pledging for this sorority. And so you've got that going on, but then you've also got like this side plot that becomes the main plot of like this mystery that revolves around someone in the sorority that died years ago, and then like some mysterious things that start going on with this sorority. So it's really fascinating to see all the layers within this book, but I just really liked seeing our characters grow together and become, you know, how different they are, but they like come together to solve a problem, and I really loved it. I thought it was so well done. Perfect for like the spooky season in my opinion. It gives you all those great fantastical witchy vibes, but I loved it so much, and it was such a shock to me because it wasn't like I didn't think I was gonna like it, but I didn't really know what to expect when I was going into it, and it ended up being just amazing. And that's it. Those are all of the 7 books that I'm going to talk about today that were huge surprises for me. I loved all of these. I'm pretty sure I gave all of them 5 stars. Yeah, I gave all of them 5 stars. They were all so good. So I highly recommend, if you haven't picked up any of these books, if anything I said today sounds interesting, please pick up these books. They're so good. But let me know down below if you have read these books or if you have a book or two that were huge surprises for you this year. I'd love to know what some of your reading was like this year. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got almost social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all of that out, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!